Many people associate paranormal activities and creepy things with old abandoned houses and buildings, but this incident took place in an office building where George used to work. George worked in an international organization and his office was operational 24/7. The organization had hired cabs for its staff for their transportation. George was at night shift that day. After finishing his shift, he left the office and went to the parking to look for cabs to take him home. But unfortunately, all the cabs were gone and there was no office cab to take him home that night. He started to consider options to travel home when he heard footsteps of someone coming towards him. That was a smartly dressed, beautiful girl around 25 years of age. She approached him and asked whether George has also missed the cab. George, who was baffled at her sudden appearance, replied, "Yes, I missed the cab and looking for options to go home." The girl smiled strangely and went away. It was uncommon for anyone to hang out late at night in a car parking. Moreover, her smile was surprising. However, George was tired and didn't pay much attention to it and went towards office. He requested the transport officer if he could arrange an alternative for him. The transport supervisor checked and said that the transport will be available in 15 minutes and asked George to wait in lobby till then. George also casually told the officer that he had seen a girl in the parking and perhaps she also has missed her transport, so if he could check with hers as well. The transport officer became curious and told George there is no one else in the office at this time, and even no such girl works in this office, and no one has approached him for any transportation. George was confused, but he didn't think much about it as he was tired. On his way home, he told the driver about a girl he saw in the parking, and the driver abruptly replied that what George came across was not a girl, but it was a spirit, and it was seen regularly in that parking. The driver told that many other drivers had also seen that thing around 3 at night near the parking. He also told that few years ago, something wrong happened to a girl and her dead body was found in the parking. Perhaps it might be the spirit of that girl, the driver speculated. George was scared and he made sure to never be alone in the parking at night. Few months passed. George forgot about that girl as she never appeared again. Few months later, he was waiting for his cab. Meanwhile, the same girl appeared, waving her hands, asking to drop her home with him. Afraid, George started to run and she followed him to some distance and disappeared. The transport arrived for George. He opened the front door to sit in, but there was someone already seated in that place, and it was that girl. George slammed the door and ran into the office and fainted there. Next day, when he woke up, he found himself in home. George was mentally occupied by that spirit girl. He spent few days at home recovering from trauma and decided to quit that job. George now works in an accounting firm during the daytime. This was a real incident narrated by George himself. Such mysterious creatures can be found anywhere, and we should not associate them with any abandoned or derelict place. George made a wise decision to quit that job, otherwise anything worse could have happened. On April 18, 1991, police entered the house of a man named Christopher. When the police thoroughly searched the house, they found many strange things. When they went to the bathroom, they found Christopher's body in the tub. The police were very shocked when they saw the body. They immediately sent it for a post-mortem. and didn't file any case because it seemed like a natural death. The police closed the case without any investigation. Christopher's family told the police about everything that had happened. To this day, the police and everyone else are puzzled about the case, wondering how Christopher could have predicted his own death. To understand this case, we have to go to Seattle in 1991, where a 35-year-old man named Christopher Case lived. Christopher's life was going well. He had completed his education, was over 35 years old, but was still single. No one knows why he hadn't found a girl yet. It was his personal life. Christopher was very interested in music, so much so that he worked in a music company in Seattle. He had made many friends at work because he met various artists, big singers of the time, pop, rock, all kinds of singers came to their studio. He knew all of them, and everything was going well. His parents were very worried because their son was 35 and still hadn't found a girl. They were looking at many proposals for him, and even told him about a girl they wanted him to meet. But Christopher would refuse, saying he didn't want to get married yet and wanted to focus on his music career. Especially in music, Christopher loved old ancient music. He loved ancient Egyptian music, which people used to listen to in ancient times. Christopher was very fond of that music. 5 people, including Christopher, planned a business trip. They were actually supposed to go to San Francisco. They had a meeting there with a band group and had to finalize their music. Christopher was taken along with his 4 friends. They all boarded the plane and directly reached San Francisco from Seattle. By evening, they had arrived. Their hotel was already booked. They checked in, kept their luggage, freshened up, had dinner, and went out. As night approached, they planned to organize a small party. They had no plans to sleep that night. They decided to drink and have fun, and wake up relaxed the next morning. The next day, they had to meet with the band group. As the 5 of them sat in an open ground to have their party, one of the guys called a friend who lived in San Francisco. This friend was actually a woman, around 55 to 56 years old. As soon as she heard about the party, she got excited and said she would join them by 10 p.m. The group was excited because another member was joining who knew about San Francisco. As soon as the woman arrived, she sat among them. They started the party, began drinking, and since they were all related to music, they discussed music. Christopher was sharing about his music preferences. As soon as he mentioned that he liked ancient Egyptian music, the woman who had just joined the group got very excited. She immediately moved next to Christopher and started discussing how she also loved ancient Egyptian music. As Christopher heard that this woman also liked ancient Egyptian music, their conversation deepened. They started getting to know each other better. They had a common interest, so their bond was growing stronger. One of the group members showed his concern on the growing friendship between Christopher and that woman, but the rest of the guys were not concerned. "It's okay, they're just talking, let them. What's the problem?" While there, Christopher and the woman were engrossed in their conversation. But Christopher was only talking about music, whereas the woman in front of him had become a bit romantic. She repeatedly placed her hand on Christopher, caressed his hands, and touched his thighs. This behavior seemed a bit strange to Christopher because he hadn't come for this. He just liked discussing music. Time was passing slowly. the other four friends who were sitting at the table, while on the side, Christopher and the woman continued their conversation. By morning, they were still talking. The other four didn't care, but by dawn, Christopher had realized that while the woman was interested in music, no doubt, she also wanted to get romantically attached to him, which he absolutely didn't want. He had no intention of doing anything like that. As morning approached, the other four woke up with hangovers, wandering around trying to sober up. But Christopher was still discussing music-related topics with the woman. When the woman saw the other four had woken up, she suggested to Christopher, "Why don't we go to my place? We can talk better there, get a bit closer." When Christopher heard this, he realized, No, this woman is wrong. She could do something wrong with me. I won't go." Christopher clearly refused to go with her. She kept insisting that they could talk better there, listen to music, party, drink, and he could return after his meeting with the band group. But Christopher again refused, saying, "No, I can't go with you. Why do you keep forcing me?" As soon as the woman heard this, the woman who had been speaking so sweetly until now became very angry. She grabbed the bottle that Christopher was about to pick up and said, "The woman you have been talking to all night, I'm not a woman, but actually a demon. I have given you a drink that will kill you within a week." As soon as Christopher heard this, he was very scared. The woman he had been talking to for so long seemed strange to him. He had only refused to go to her house. If she just wanted to talk, why didn't she do it here? But Christopher didn't think much about it. He didn't believe that anything like this could ever happen. He ignored what she said, went to his friends, and the woman left for her home. He told his friends about the woman and also told the friend who had invited her. He explained how she had talked to him all night and wanted to take him to her home in the morning. But when he refused, he said such things to him. Upon hearing this, the friend also started laughing, saying, "Such things don't really happen." At this point, Christopher also ignored the matter, simply finished his meetings and other tasks, and late at night on the 12th of April, he had a flight. He caught his flight, and all five of them had returned to Seattle, getting back to their respective jobs. The night of the 12th of April went by smoothly. It was the morning of the 13th of April. Chris woke up, got ready, made breakfast, and left his house. He took his car and went to his office, where he worked throughout the day. By evening, he returned home and called his friend Simi using his landline. Simi, who no longer lived in the city, had shifted to another state due to her job. However, the bond between the two was strong. Christopher called Simi and told her about the strange incident that had happened with him the night before, about a woman he met and what she had said to him. When Simi heard this, she found it both strange and funny. She laughed heartedly, and hearing her, Christopher also started laughing. They both took the matter as a joke. After their conversation ended, he prepared his dinner and went to sleep. He hadn't slept well on the night of the 11th because he was talking to the woman, and on the night of the 12th, he came home exhausted. So on the night of the 13th, after a full day of work, he felt very tired. He ate a little and went to sleep comfortably. But as soon as he started sleeping, he felt very strange because it seemed like there was someone else in his house. While Chris lived alone in the house, he had no pets like cats or dogs, let alone another person. He felt like there were whispering sounds, tapping noises, and a thud, thud, thud sound. Christopher got up from his bed and started checking inside the house to find out where the noises were coming from. At first, he thought the sounds might be coming from the living room. He got up from his bed and went to the living room to trace the sounds. But as soon as he reached the living room, it felt like the sounds were coming from upstairs. He slowly started climbing the stairs, thinking there might be someone upstairs, but there was no one there either. But the noises were coming from right in front of him. He followed the sounds, but suddenly they shifted downwards. Chasing these sounds, he began to move downstairs, only to realize that the noises were now coming from the room he had just been sleeping in. He became very scared. Slowly and quietly, he entered his room, where the noises were still coming from. It sounded like tapping, and as if someone was walking inside. But as soon as he entered, he saw no one. Yet the noises continued, changing directions repeatedly. Following the sound again, he went to the living room, because now the noise was coming from there. But he decided that this time, before looking directly at the source, he would first turn on the light to see who was inside. As soon as he entered the living room, where the noises were still coming from, he turned on the light. Upon doing so, he saw a large shadow on his wall. The sight of this shadow terrified him. The light turned off on its own, and in shock, he ran back to his room to see what the noise would do next. But now his attention was more on the shadowy figure. He kept turning the lights on and off, checking the entire house to see where the shadowy figure was and what it was doing in his house. In this chaos, the entire night passed, and it was morning. The first thing he did in the morning was to call Simi, his friend. He sounded very scared as he told her everything. Simi tried to calm him down, suggesting that it might be his imagination since he hadn't slept properly for the last few nights. But he insisted that he had to go to the office as he had a lot of work. At the office, he told his friends about his experiences, but they all took it as a joke, thinking he might be playing a prank on them. In the evening, Christopher left the office, drove home, and was very tired since he hadn't slept the previous night or the night before that. He was facing challenges in his life. After preparing and eating his meal, he was looking straight at his bed, thinking, "Yes, I will sleep peacefully on it now." But as he tried to sleep, he remembered the noises from the previous night. So he thought, why not sleep with all the lights in the house turned on, since he was feeling very sleepy. Regardless of any noise or disturbance, he would fall asleep. There's no problem. He turned on all the lights in the house and went to sleep peacefully. But just 15 to 20 minutes after he went to sleep, he woke up. He remembered turning off the lights, and he didn't just wake up without reason. From his room, he could hear loud knocking sounds. When he opened his eyes and looked towards the entrance to the living hall on his right, he saw a shadow on the wall. He stared at the shadow, feeling very scared. At the same time, he thought maybe he was hallucinating because he hadn't slept properly for many nights. Maybe it was all in his subconscious and he should ignore it. It was the morning of the 15th, and he had somehow made it through the night. Though he hadn't slept well, on the 15th, He went to his office early in the morning, finished his work, took his car and returned home. Today, he had decided that he would sleep as soon as he got home. He had eaten outside and only wanted to see his bed. He changed his clothes and went straight to his bedroom. All the lights in the house were off, and he was sleeping peacefully. But around 11 p.m., he woke up to the same knocking sound, but this time it was coming from inside his room. Before, the sound came from other parts of the house, but now it was from his room. Hearing this, he woke up. He tried to look around, but only his eyes were moving. He couldn't move his face, hands, or feet. Literally, Christopher was paralyzed. His entire body was frozen. He told himself that maybe he was hallucinating, but not only could he hear the noises, but as soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the shadowy figure moving around his room. Sometimes it was messing with his clothes in the closet. Sometimes it was under his bed, hitting him from below. He could feel the hits, as if someone was trying to pull him up. Imagine the state of the poor guy. He couldn't move, and the shadowy figure was knocking him around. But in his mind, he was only thinking that he should just get through this night. The next day, he saw the figure standing up from below and standing right in front of him. It grabbed him by the neck with both hands and threw him against the wall. The impact was so strong that Christopher, a fit young man, felt pain in his shoulder because he hit the wall shoulder first. But after the impact, he fell down and didn't know when he fell asleep. It was morning when he woke up. He immediately called his friend Simi and told her everything that happened the previous night. How he couldn't move, how the figure lifted him and threw him, and how he didn't know when he fell asleep. He was sleeping on the carpet when he woke up. Simi, hearing all this, was also very worried. She tried to calm Christopher down, saying everything would be all right. These are just bad times and they will pass. After talking, Simi hung up and Christopher put the landline phone down. But as he turned around, he noticed blood on the dial pad of the landline phone. Seeing this, he looked around his house and saw blood splatters on all the walls. Following the splatters, he went back to his bedroom and saw a lot of blood on his bed. When he composed himself and looked at his fingers, he saw cuts on all 10 fingertips. The cuts were straight and long, and blood was oozing out of them non-stop. There was blood all over the bed. There was blood on the carpet below. He then returned to the same landline, dialed Simi again, and began telling her that he just noticed cuts on all 10 of his fingers, and blood is oozing out of them. He barely managed to stop the bleeding. He didn't know what to do. As soon as Simi heard this, she said, "Do you remember a few days ago that woman from San Francisco gave you a drink and cursed you? All this would happen to you. Maybe you could even die." As soon as Christopher heard this, he felt that maybe all this was happening because of that. That woman cursed me, that this would happen to you. Otherwise, nothing like this has ever happened to me before. Simi then said, "Yes, it's supposed to happen this month, and you'll have to find a solution. You'll have to find a way, and the only way might be to cleanse yourself of these demonic forces." Christopher was listening to Simi, even though he didn't believe in such things. Simi suggested, "Do one thing. Go to a bookstore nearby. Buy books on exorcism and possessions. Get the crucifixes, the cross you might have seen, which is the significant symbol of the Christian faith. used to ward off evil. Get them and perform a ritual in your house. As soon as Christopher heard this, he liked the idea. He immediately got ready and went to the nearby bookstore. The owner of the bookstore was a couple. He told them everything that was happening to him. The couple gave him many books, more than 10, and said, "Read all of these at your home, thoroughly and attentively. Also take the crucifixes with you. Hang them on the wall of your house." Here, Christopher took dozens of these crosses. He believed he would hang them on every wall and everywhere in his house to drive away the evil force. As soon as he got home, Christopher started reading the books. In the very first book, he found the solution that if all this happens to you, do this. He immediately took the crucifixes he had brought and started hanging them on the walls. He ran out of crucifixes, so he went out to get more. Literally, the color of the wall was not visible. Throughout the house, on every wall, only crosses were visible everywhere. Additionally, the book mentioned drawing a thick line of salt around the house so that spirits cannot enter. Also, draw a line of salt where you sleep so they can't come near you. Christopher was busy doing all the tasks. He brought bags of salt and created a boundary around his house. He also made lines of salt at various places inside the house. He felt that now he would be able to sleep peacefully. However, even after doing all this, he was terrified in the middle of the night. He saw something in his house that made his heart stop. Literally, he was so scared that he ran out of his house. There was a hotel nearby. He checked in there and slept peacefully. In the morning, Simi was waiting for a call from her friend Christopher, but he didn't call. She tried calling Christopher's landline, but he wasn't answering. She tried many times, but Christopher didn't pick up. Worried, Simi called the local police station and informed them about what was happening with Christopher. She asked them to check on him. As soon as the police found out about Christopher's situation, a team went to his house, but the house was locked. They peeked inside and everything seemed calm. They called Simi again and told her they were outside Christopher's locked house and couldn't do anything. They asked her to inform them if she gets in touch with Christopher so they can stop looking for him. Simi kept trying to call Christopher, but had no idea where he was. She went to her job, and by evening when she returned home and checked her phone, she found several missed calls from Christopher, which Simi couldn't pick up because she was in her office. However, as soon as she checked her voicemail, she listened to the voice messages. As Simi listened to the voicemail, she became very scared because the messages were in a very frightened voice of Christopher. He was clearly saying that something terrifying happened to him last night, but he didn't specify what. He just mentioned that today is his last day, meaning by the night of the 17th or before the morning of the 18th, they will kill him. He didn't specify who they were, just that today was his last day, and after today, he will never speak to anyone again. When Simi heard this, she became very worried that night, but she couldn't do anything as she was far away from the city and didn't have any friend's number could directly check on Christopher. The welfare check had already been done, and the police weren't going to go again. Anyway, the morning of the 18th arrived, but Christopher hadn't come to the office on the 17th or the 18th. So the office staff also started worrying about where Christopher was. They tried knocking on his door, and everyone planned to visit Christopher's place to see what was going on with him. They knew he had been a bit troubled since he returned from the trip, so they thought they should check on him. But as soon as they reached his house, they saw that the door, meaning Christopher's house door, was open. But before they entered, they peeked from outside and saw all those crucifixes and the lines of salt. They felt very uncomfortable. They first called the police, and the police came to inspect everything inside the house. Now, this house was not just a house, but was about to become a crime scene. Yes, as soon as the police entered the house, they first stepped over the salt lines, and then wondered why there were so many crucifixes scattered around. What had Christopher been so scared of? They searched the entire house, but Christopher was nowhere to be found. Finally, when the police went to the bathroom attached to Christopher's bedroom, they were shocked, because inside the bathroom, the bathtub, which usually contains water, was empty. But there, Christopher was sitting on his knees, leaning against the wall with his head down, and he was already dead. Yes, as soon as the police approached Christopher, there were no signs of injury on his body, except for a blue line around his neck. But other than that, there were no signs of injury anywhere on his body. He was very scared of all these things, and perhaps on the night of the 17th, meaning in the middle of the night, he might have seen something that scared him to death. The police placed his body in an ambulance, which went to the hospital, and now a post-mortem was to be conducted on his body. In the post-mortem, nothing significant was found, only that Christopher died of a heart attack. But as soon as Simi and his friends heard this, Simi immediately informed his family that he had been telling her about all this for quite some time. So, all the family members, Simi and his friends, went to the police and told them about what had been happening with him in his last days. As soon as the police heard this, they were also surprised. How could this happen? Was there some demonic force, some negative energy? How could it take someone's life? And when the police found out about the woman in San Francisco, a police team went to San Francisco and also questioned the woman. But the strange thing was that the woman was still there, and in her house there were also many of these crucifixes. But they were of different colors. She had also lit many candles in her house, which had burned from top to bottom, but were still burning. Where was the wax coming from? Anyway, when the police questioned her, she said, "No, sir, I was at my home. You can check my entire house. I was here. Why would I go so far?" The police had no evidence against her, but Christopher kept saying until the end that they were after him and would only be satisfied once they took his life. Here, two things are bothering me a lot. The first thing is, what was the mystery of this woman? Who was she? What did she have over Christopher? And how did she predict with such certainty that he would die within a week? And indeed he did. How could this happen? Whereas the second thing that's bothering me is Christopher's friends. Christopher used to call and tell not just Simi, but also his other friends that all this was happening to him, that he was very troubled. So why didn't his friends help him? Why didn't they meet him or invite him to stay with them? If they had kept him with them, maybe the demonic forces would have kept their distance. But no one did anything. Poor Christopher was left alone in his last days. But the case was closed by the police right there. saying that Christopher died of natural causes and there's nothing they can do about it.